I made and sold clothes in what was called the rag market in Birmingham. As sales leaders, a lot of the time, we're trying to fix, we're trying to tell, and get that order sorted. It's quite hard to take a back seat and slow it down. You slow it down and you'll speed up the result.
Welcome to the ISP podcast, where we speak to salespeople about their journeys to help you demystify the profession. Today, we are joined by Carol Kelly, Managing Director at KSA Learning and Leader at the ISP. Now, Carol, thank you so much for joining me. Did you want to take a minute to give the audience a bit more of a background and let them know how you found yourself working in the world of sales?
I really fell into sales. It wasn't something I had as a career choice. And that's what really sort of enthuses me now about the fact that individuals and people and young people are coming into sales as a career choice. I fell into sales, as I say. I had a plan to go to university, to do academics in the normal traditional way that we would have done, certainly at my time of studying A-levels, and found that I didn't want to do what I planned to do. And some of that was accountancy. So it was one of those moments that I decided, well, what else could I do? And decided to set up in a market via what was called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, which was a government scheme at the time. And I made and sold clothes in what was called the rag market in Birmingham in the UK. So that's really where I started my career in sales. And I call it a career because obviously it's evolved since then. But mainly because I decided that what else could I do? I would have a go at buying, making and selling clothes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
Now, as you mentioned, the career has evolved. You moved from that sort of B2C background, moving into the world of B2B. And in some of the conversations that we've had leading up to this podcast, there was a phrase that really stood out and kept coming up, and that was stop selling and just understand. Now, where did that idea come from for you?
It came from the principle that when I first started selling, people used to come to the store. There was a tendency for me to want to sell them something. And then I realized and started to appreciate that if I actually held a conversation with them, and that was as simple as, what do you want the item for? What sort of item are you looking for? Where are you going to wear it? And even such as, how often do you think you're going to wear it? What I realized, the more I had the conversation, the more I had an idea of what that person needed, the more they trusted me to offer them the right advice because I'd taken the time to understand. And it was a really simple lesson in life that if I wanted to offer my clothes, I wanted someone to buy them. What was more important was that they bought the right thing. Mm. But in matching that up, we would all have something that we were happy with.
Yeah, that curiosity invites people in, whereas trying to sell often creates more distance. So if you take the time to be curious and really understand it, invite people in, and it's infectious at the end of the day, right?
It is infectious. In fact, I actually got sacked from a Saturday job once, and I worked in a ladies' fashion shop. And the reason I got the sack was because I was told that every time, and I was probably about 16, 17, and so I was told that every time anyone walked through the door, I literally had to pounce on them as soon as they walked through the door and ask them, can I help you with something? And I was obviously a very defiant young person. And I said that I didn't think that was the right way to do it. I thought that you should let them browse, even if it's a couple of minutes, to sort of get a gauge of how interested they were, and then go up to them and say, is there anything I can help you with? Have you got any questions? And I was politely told that was not the way they did this in this shop. And I was given the sack. So, but I still believe that it is about engaging people and understanding them. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just out of curiosity, is the shop still in business?
It was actually a small independent, and they had them around the West Midlands area. I don't think it is actually. No, I don't think it is. But they were adamant that they wanted to really pounce on. But you know the shops, don't you? We all used to sort of have those shops where you walked and you thought, oh, I don't want to go in there because they'll pounce on. I just want to go and relax and look and make a more informed choice. So no, they're not business anymore.
Yeah. Coincidence? Nah. Questionable.
Who knows? Who knows?
Another thing that's really, I think, just jumped out to me around your sort of approach is this idea of customer-centric selling. And I know that you've engaged with both sales teams as well as more technical teams. I'm curious, how has that influenced the way you view sort of truly customer-centric selling?
Yeah, I think for me, at KSA Learning, we've actually conducted many sales skills assessments prior to looking at creating training collateral. And one of the things that occurred to me at early stages again was quite often when you're running an assessment centre, there will be the need, for example, for technical people to become more proactive in their approach to understanding the customer and also developing skills to be able to add on sales, to making you more obvious about how they're going to offer the solution. So, for example, if there was a sales assessment where we had technical people and salespeople together, we would set scenarios where each one of them would have to look at a role play scenario where they were selling a product. Now, we always chose a product that wasn't related to their industry, but was something that everybody should know about. For example, a mobile phone. We always found the technical people were able to engage in that role play and understand the customer and what their needs were more than the experienced salesperson. And what became really apparent, as we saw that quite a few times, was when you don't know any skills and you don't know what you don't know, your automatic natural reaction is to want to understand more so that you understand what that person wants and needs.
Yeah.
If you have the sales skills already taught, known, you're utilizing them, you may not be using all the essential ones. So what tended to happen was the more experienced salespeople tended to do what I would call the tell sell. So they would literally start to explain what the mobile phone was, or if that was the product, tell all about the features, not even the benefits of, and then force the customer, or not even encourage, but push the customer or force them down the line of buying that product. Whereas the technical person just simply asked lots of questions and then established out this would be the phone that would be suitable for you. So it's a bit like a parent and a child. If your child is not necessarily doing something right and you want to understand they're not in a good place and you want to understand what's wrong with them, you don't just assume. Hopefully you'll ask them questions. Just as, the doctor at the surgery, if they want to offer a solution to their patient, hopefully they take the time to ask the questions. So it was a natural part of the sales process, which it is, but salespeople often jump and skip when they're looking to push the product.
When we're in a position, a sort of high pressure environment, we often tend to revert to what we know.
Sure.
And for salespeople, sometimes that is that sort of pitch mode. And it ends up having a sort of detrimental effect, typically, at least. When, as you said, the real value actually often comes from when we slow down, take a step back, seek to understand further. What does that look like practically in a sales conversation? Are there any sort of techniques that you have found to work in terms of helping salespeople to flag that they're entering that pitch mode and, okay, they need to hit the brakes and just go back into that understanding mode, that curiosity, zone of curiosity?
I think the way to look at it is if you were to take a typical sales conversation, whether that's face-to-face meeting or on the telephone or via Teams, is that if you find yourself doing more of the talking, then you know it's going wrong. certainly at the initial stages of the conversation. Because if you look at the whole sales process, one of the largest parts that we should be focusing on is that information gathering. So we'll plan certain information as well, but the information gathering, so that should be the main part before we offer the solution. Now, if we do that right, the solution is going to fall out from the questions.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself, as say, doing most of the talking and filling gaps, then you'll know you're not doing it right.
Yeah, certainly. And you mentioned earlier about those innate sort of behaviours. Typically, more technical people. An example, like if someone's got an engineering background, they're problem solvers. That's the way they're built. So the way they approach things will be through that lens. But for someone that is a more traditional salesperson or is more that way inclined, what can they do to better prepare themselves for the calls, that information gathering ahead of the call to ensure that when they are in the call, they're not put in that uncomfortable position and then revert into their comfort zone of pitching, for example?
Yeah, I think the way to look at it, if you take the example that you've given, Jordan, where we talk about a technical person who's more likely to be that problem solver who has a logical approach to it. So that has obviously many aspects, but that might be more of an introverted character. So that individual will be really strong at asking the right questions to offer the right solution, because to them questions make sense. How can you possibly have an answer to something if you don't know the answer to the questions in the first place to order the solution? So if you take that type of individual, more introverted, more logical in their approach, they still might find it challenging, for example, to close, to take that final step of confidence to ask for the order or ask for the next inquiry or whatever it might be. So they will have their challenges too. So something they're comfortable with and something that may stretch them or put them more into a panic zone than the asking questions. Now, if you take the extroverted individual, they're more likely to be comfortable with the rapport, with the talking, but not necessarily gathering the information, because they'll want to move on very quickly to the actual product sell.
Yeah.
How can they help themselves? Well, it's a bit like slowing down to speed up. So the planning they do before the call is essential to them to keep them on a logical, straightforward path. So, for example, the planning stage might very well be understand that customer's world, look at their website, check out what's going on with them in social media at the moment, what's important to them, look at the individual they're having the conversation with, just find out what's going on with them in social media, what jobs are out there for them, what things are going on within their business, so that you are already starting to think about the questions that you're going to ask. So plan your questions. That way, you'll keep on a logical track and make sure that you're informed. Now, those type of individuals might plan, for example, what transactions have they had? When was their last order? How much have they purchased to date or not purchased to date? Who they buy from? They're all typical, what I would call transactional planning suggestions. But what I'm saying is, on that customer-centric side of things, plan to understand the individual and what's happening in their world will make you more focused in the questions that you ask.
What we're talking about is so powerful, but often it can be difficult for an individual to catch themselves or to realize, okay, maybe I'm going down a route that isn't conducive of a fantastic buying experience. And I think that's where the skill of self-awareness becomes so important to avoid defaulting to those innate behaviors. What role do you think the individual has to play versus, how can leadership actually support and drive that self-awareness?
I think it's a good starting point, and we would recommend, and I would certainly recommend, that as part of what you do within the business, you have a self-awareness piece. Maybe it's profiling to understand, what are your natural traits that come comfortably for you in your own sales development and your own sales behaviors. And as a business to maybe run those reports to have a look at that. Now, from there, you establish what am I good at? What am I strong at? But also, what are the areas that I need to develop? And those are the areas that the business, the line manager, or perhaps through the L&D department or skills that they should be supporting to increase those areas, because we're all strong in some areas and we are all have areas where we need to develop.
Yeah.
And that includes all of us, and if you're aware of that, being in the environment that I've been for 35 years or more, I still know where I am strong, but I also know where I need to continue to develop. And they do say that every day is a learning day, don't they? So
yeah,
continue on with that.
There's a quadrant that my dad actually took me through, and I might get the sort of titles of the quadrant slightly wrong. But it's along the lines of unconsciously incompetent.
Yes.
Consciously incompetent, consciously competent, unconsciously competent, and it's this curve of effort versus reward, right? Yeah. And just having that in my mind helps me to approach certain things in a certain way and just understand, okay, where am I? Where do I think I am on this quadrant? And again, it just helps me to prioritize where I should focus my improvement.
And your dad was absolutely right. I think the idea is that, when you're looking at someone in a learning environment and you're helping to develop skills, just as the ISP are, sometimes we have to look at to say, let's weight them up to the fact that I'm consciously incompetent in a particular area. And that's not all areas. Of course it's not. But once you know that and you're aware of that, and if you have the right motivation and the right sales behavior and want to address that, then that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's the first step, right?
Absolutely.
Now, earlier you shared an example of when you got the sack because you didn't agree with the approach. And I think often we see this even in sort of complex B2B selling B2C or B2B selling environment, when the individual really values and embraces a customer first approach, but it's not necessarily as effective as it could be because they don't have the sort of leadership environment or the culture that actually reinforces and rewards it. So I want to go a bit deeper. Now, what are some of the risks that could be associated if that shift towards customer centricity isn't actually supported by leadership?
It's a good question. And ultimately, it just a few things. I think to the individual, let's say the salesperson that feels absolutely they want to have a customer centric approach and they want to take time to understand the customer and listen. If they're not seeing that type of culture within their own organization, then that then leaves them to start to think possibly, do I have the same values and do I have the same beliefs? And then starts them to start thinking, actually, is this the right company for me? So they might very well be one of your high performing salespeople, but not necessarily comfortable in the environment, that the culture is not right for them. So then you have the idea of, are we going to retain our staff that feel that way? The second thing really from the point of view of the business is that if your approach is very much what I would call transactional and looking at data that's gone past the sales data and the sales figures only, then you're not necessarily going to address what the customer wants and needs. So over the years of time that I have seen many situations where companies come out with new products, new ideas, new services, and they haven't spoken to their own sales team, or sometimes not even to the customer. And they've taken a very inside out approach to what the customer wants. Yeah. And if they actually had stopped to ask the customer, but also to ask the sales team, they would have taken a different approach. I think that then means that are the companies offering the right solutions for their customers?
One, the best thing to do is to speak directly to the customers. But secondly, your sales team are on the front line. They're the people that are going into battle every day. They're getting instant feedback from the market. So it's really important to take that feedback on. One, to benefit the product development or service development roadmap, but also to ensure that your salespeople are feeling valued and feeling fulfilled, like they're actually really supporting the business to reach the North Star.
Yeah. And the other thing is I'm talking about taking an objective viewpoint from the salespeople. I'm not talking about those conversations that, why haven't we sold more this month? Oh, the market's really quiet, or it's going to happen. They say they're going to order. Because again, we've had those conversations that it's more about objectivity, that, we go out, we speak to our customers, we get our salespeople to have the conversations, and we measure and monitor what comes back objectively so that we can make informed decisions rather than off the cuff decisions.
Yeah, that should be sort of a constant approach. That's
Sure.
constant feedback loop. And I know that that's something that you really believe in, both in that sense, but also in the sense of helping to drive continuous improvement in people within the team. But what does that look like on the day-to-day for a sales leader that perhaps has come from an environment or is in an environment where it was always just, okay, this is the one-to-one time, this is the only block that you've got? How can they make that transition or drive that transition within their organization?
I think the idea of coaching, certainly for sales leaders, sometimes is a little bit, they're a bit apprehensive because it sounds like it's going to be something that's going to be quite formalized, having to slot X time out of the diary, and they are, Y number of salespeople they have to speak to. So it becomes quite a hard mountain to climb. Now, we all know how important it is, but sometimes that means that, it gets missed because the day runs away, the week runs away, and the month runs away. So what I'm suggesting, and for good coaching, is those conversations are in the moment. So whether we are standing at a coffee machine, whether we're on the telephone having a conversation, to ask those questions about the customers, about what's happening out there in the market, that support the individual. So for an example, it might be that you had an individual who was visiting a customer.
Yeah.
And it's an important call for that individual. And you give them a call at the end of the day, perhaps maybe to say as simple as, how did it go with Joe Blogs? And that question is quite an open question. Well, it is an open question, but it's quite a wide, expansive question. So we're not necessarily, did you get the order? We're not necessarily saying, have you got them as a new customer or whatever it might be, but we're saying, how did it go? So for starters, it's a question that feels more comfortable for the salesperson. So it might very well go, oh, it went really well. We talked about the order and they've committed to actually ordering from us. Now, that conversation could finish then with, oh, that's good. But the leader should really start to then dig a little bit deeper, and not what's the lead time? When are we going to get it on the order books? When are we going to see it as a sales number? But more about, well, what about what happened in that call? Do you think made that Joe Blogs change their mind or decide to go with us?
Yeah.
And it could be in a simple answer. And what part did you think you played in that? What did you learn from that call?
Yeah.
Remember Pete Smith call that we've got a problem with? How could you use what happened in that call and transfer that to the next call?
Yeah.
And then offer your solutions as well. Have you thought about? Have you considered? What if you were to? It's a simple conversation, not easy.
Yeah.
Because as sales leaders, a lot of the time, we're trying to fix, we're trying to tell, we're trying to get that number, trying to get that order sorted. So it's quite hard to take a back seat and slow it down. But again, it goes that you slow it down and you'll speed up the result.
So what is something that you've learned outside of the world of sales that you think has helped you to lead better inside of it?
You made the point well when you said it's about it being human.
Yeah.
And I really believe that for everything we do, whether it's performance management, whether it's sales, whether it's leadership, it is always about being human. I mean, we have lots of different sort of phrases and terminologies that change over time, but the point is being human. And what I think I've learned is that when you tell people what they should do, you will be successful maybe 10, 20% of the time, if that. But when you get them to recognize the benefits and think about their solution themselves, they are much more likely to take ownership and run with that solution.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing I've learned so many times through, whether it's, with family, friends, or in business.
There's some great research out there. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to some of the sales stats, but it's something along the lines of those organizations that actively and proactively think about the employee experience, it has a knock-on effect on the customer experience, and the performance uplift is something like 252% as part of the piece of research that I read. But it just goes to show, when you really take that people first approach, your employees then embody that and provide that experience to their customers. We typically overcomplicate things in sales. We have more tools, we have higher targets, there's other techniques. It can create noise, it can create distractions. Why do we tend to overcomplicate sales processes, and how can teams actively focus on the customer journey rather than the sales process?
Sales process is quite a simple process, and you could name many different processes out there, and individual businesses have their own process, or can have their own internal sales process. But the idea of, do we overcomplicate it? It depends how we use it. If we use the sales process that actually says, how do we map the customer journey against that sales process? And if we're prepared to then look at what are the touch points with the customer as we go through our internal sales process. And there's an importance to having the sales process, because one, we can measure, we can monitor, we can look at how successful we are at certain points and what areas need to be developed. And strategically, it's really important to understand that. But that doesn't tell us how the customer is feeling, thinking, or what their needs are being measured. So if we could take our sales process, then map the customer journey, the touch points we have, and how does our sales process support or hinder the customer journey?
Yeah.
As an example, it might be that you ring a call center, and the efficiency is there because we've set up a new phone system and we can take calls in X number of seconds, etc. But then if the customer comes on and the approach of the individual, because they don't have a customer-centric approach, because the business hasn't helped and supported them with that, and they're very much the the computer says no type of approach.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't matter how efficient your sales processes and your systems are. If the customer's not engaged with, then it makes no difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important to go through that mapping exercise. And while internally we can focus on the sales process, so that we can ensure that we're, following the process that works, while also ensuring that we're guiding the buyer to the best solution for them, and really being buyer-centric without being forceful, right?
Yeah, absolutely, without being forceful. I have seen examples where when they've looked at the customer journey linked to the sales process, actually they found, for example, one client found that people that emailed in kept getting put to the bottom of the list, because people that called in were getting engaged with first. And so if you emailed in, it was taking days to get back to people. Just a simple switch like that. If they had mapped it out better initially, they would have found that out a lot sooner.
So whenever customer facing, it's really important to have the buyer journey in mind, so that it sort of encourages buyer-centric behaviors. But even still, with the pressure that often comes with being a salesperson, having the sales process, having the target, we can end up, getting pulled into the sales motion, the sales process. Oh, I need to do this. That's maybe not buyer-centric. So how can sellers really ensure that they're staying grounded in real human customer-centric conversations? Are there any sort of habits or principles that you encourage?
If you're in an organization as a salesperson that is very much about, targets and numbers, and the conversation is constantly about that, then that is going to increase that sales behavior, where you are then thinking constantly about numbers and what needs to happen. And therefore, your own mindset is more stressed. It's more thinking about the numbers, you're looking at the end result constantly instead of the parts that you have to do in order to achieve the end results.
Yeah.
And that's quite tough, particularly if you're in a culture that wants and encourages that. Yeah. And that really means that the sales leaders have to change their approach because, you know, when we're thinking as simple as baking a cake, you know, if you're on Bake Off, you know, when you put you've got to have the right ingredients to end up with the best cake.
Yeah.
So they don't focus on the best cake. They focus on all the ingredients. Are they mixing them right? Are they adding them right? And that's the same with the sales. So as an individual salesperson, it's about having that right mindset that says, you know, I know I've got to get the end result, but I'm also going to have to do these things in order to achieve that, take these activities.
Yes.
And that's not always easy when the culture of a business pushes for the end result, the cake, instead of getting the right ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that idea of focusing too much on the destination and not enough on the journey.
Absolutely.
We could carry on all day, but I know that's got a busy day. What is one shift that you would love to see in both salespeople and leaders that you think will have the biggest impact this year?
I think it's about planning. When you are planning this year or you're planning for next year, start to think about how does that look for the customer? Look through the lens of the customer as you look at your new processes, your new procedures, your new range of products and services. That's on a level of the leaders. For the salesperson, it's starting to plan the interaction with the customer. So as we talked about earlier, it's about planning to understand the person's world and their business so that when you do plan your questions around that and then have the conversation.
And the one thing that I would add to that just jumped into my mind as you were talking was when you are building out those questions, try and think about your customer's customer. Right.
Absolutely.
It will really help you to move into that customer-centric mindset rather than thinking about the questions that are going to help your agenda. So to speak, you progress the sales cycle, it will help you to really try and understand something that the MD at the ISP reminds me of. What importance is having a customer?
Yes, absolutely. What impact is it having on the customer's customer? And also what impact can you have on the whole work-life balance for the individual that you're talking to? You know, it's not only it's about solving solutions that help them to gain back more of their personal life, for example. So it's all those things that, going back to the point that you made and we talked about, it's about being human in the interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Carol, that has been a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
Where can listeners go and learn more and connect with you? I guess LinkedIn's probably the best way.
LinkedIn is probably the best way to go. So please feel free to direct message me or connect with me on LinkedIn. That'll be great. Other than that, you can view a little bit more about me on our website, which is ksalearning.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Carol.
Pleasure.
To everyone listening, until next time. Next week on the ISP podcast.
I'm such an excitable person. I wake up almost bouncing. I'm passionate about young people joining this profession. You don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to start coaching. You need me to go and make time to develop that skill in your profile and then execute it. You can't be a leader if you're not a coach.